Barako, Research Associate European Foundation for South Asian Studies from Holland. Ma'am, floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear ladies and gentlemen, it is a true pleasure for me to be invited to speak at this August gathering. I would like to start by stating that terrorism is the most deplorable violation of human rights. In addition, death threats and creating hit lists of people who oppose violence and terrorism and work towards peace is perhaps the biggest infringement of a person's inalienable human right of freedom of expression. My colleague Mr. Junaid Qureshi, Director of the European Foundation for South Asian Studies, and his family living in Srinagar, Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir, are paying a heavy price for their relentless peaceful efforts to bring about sustainable stability in South Asia, as they continuously receive death threats and appear on certain hit lists on the internet, which according to the Jammu and Kashmir police are operated in Pakistan by the Lashkar-e-Taiba and Pakistan's security agencies. From this August platform, I would like to draw the UN's attention to the strenuous circumstances in which human rights activists work. The safety and security of people who strive to safeguard human rights should be the UN's priority. The ghastly terrorist attack in Pulwama in Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir on the 14th of February that killed more than 40 personnel of the paramilitary Central Reserve Police Force and injured scores of others appears to have scaled the brink of India's forbearance with neighboring Pakistan. The string of terrorist attacks launched in recent years by terrorist outfits Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, which are sheltered on Pakistani territory by the Pakistani military establishment, has inflamed passions and indignation in India. Such reactions signify that public opinion in India, which had progressively inched towards the tipping point following the Mumbai terrorist attacks carried out by Lashkar-e-Taiba in 2008 and the Pathankot and Uri attacks by the Jaish-e-Mohammed in January and September 2016 respectively, had now firmly turned the corner. This has put the Indian government under acute pressure to shed the restraint exercised by it thus far and respond more forcefully than it has done in the past to continuous Pakistani provocations through its terrorist proxies. Therefore, the military response that had been anticipated as part of India's comprehensive strategy to address the plague of Pakistani-sponsored terrorism directed against India took the form of telling airstrikes in the wee hours of the 26th of February that obliterated a major Jaish-e-Mohammed terrorist camp in Balakot in the Pakistani province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. An embarrassed Pakistan, after initially denying that any such incident had occurred, subsequently acknowledged reluctantly that Indian fighter aircraft had indeed penetrated deep into Pakistani territory undetected and had dropped bombs near Balakot. Pakistan's botched attempt at retaliation through an airstrike targeting Indian military installations on the morning of the 27th of February were repulsed by the Indian Air Force near the line of control that separates the two countries across a major part of Jammu and Kashmir. The Indian Air Force shot down a Pakistani F-16 fighter, but also lost one of its MiG-21 fighters whose pilot, who had ejected before impact, drifted across the LOC and was picked up by Pakistani forces there. Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan has since appealed to India for de-escalation and under pressure from the United States announced on the 28th of February that Pakistan would return the pilot to India on March 1st as peace gesture. He has, however, not articulated any commitment to clamp down demonstratively on the terrorist proxies of the Pakistani military establishment. Anything short of that is not likely to appease the infuriated Indian government. The situation between the two countries, therefore, remains highly tense and volatile. India's Foreign Secretary Vijay Gokhale put the nature of the Indian Air Force operation in clear perspective when he described it as a non-military, preemptive action specifically targeted at the Jaish-e-Mohammed camp, adding that the escalation of the target was also conditioned by India's desire to avoid civilian casualties. These carefully chosen words convey that what India had undertaken was essentially a counter-terrorist operation aimed at neutralizing terrorist attacks against India that specific intelligence had indicated was imminent. It was not directed against the Pakistani people or the Pakistani army, but at terrorists, and great care had been taken to avoid civilian casualties. The core message to Pakistan was that India was willing and capable of acting against anti-India terrorist groups being harbored by Pakistan, and while it was not inclined to provoke the Pakistani military, it was now seriously intent on protecting itself no matter what the potential response from Pakistan would be. Amidst the tensions between India and Pakistan, incidents of harassment of Kashmiri students, traders and workers in different parts of India in the aftermath of the Pulwama attack indicated that sections within India need urgent education on the status and rights of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. It was pleasing to note that in such a situation, the Indian Prime Minister took the important task upon himself to publicly deplore these incidents when he underlined that the sons of the Kashmiri soil have also fallen victim to the bullets of terrorists, and the safety of each Kashmiri settled anywhere in India is the responsibility of every Indian. India had made it fairly clear after the Pulwama attacks that the military response was foreseeable. The only mystery was over the form it would take. The Balakot strike therefore led to serious questions in Pakistan about the inability of the Pakistani forces to even detect the Indian Air Force's jets, let alone engage them, which made a mockery of statements such as those of Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi that the defenders of the nations are awake and the nation has nothing to worry about. The hesitant statements on whether or not and exactly where the strike took place, and with what impact, which were intermittently emanating from the spokesman of the Pakistani army, did not help matters. The fact that India chose a target deep in the Pakistani heartland, and not on contagious Pakistan administered Jammu and Kashmir soil that India claims is legally belonging to it, heightened the insecurity of the Pakistani leadership even more. Desperate for a face-saving option that would become an agitated opposition and a confused and rattled nation, Imran Khan chaired an emergency meeting on the 26th of February, after which he averred that India has committed uncalled for aggression, to which Pakistan shall respond at the time and place of its choosing. He also called a meeting of the National Command Authority that is tasked with overseeing Pakistan's nuclear weapons, the intention being to yet again flaunt Pakistan's nuclear capability as a deterrent. What becomes evident is that Pakistan is the only country that is willing to go to war and even threaten to use its nuclear weapons in order to protect terrorist organizations operating on its soil. Amidst calls for de-escalation of tensions, the international community stressed on Pakistan that it must deny safe haven to terrorist outfits operating from its soil. The diplomatic cloud that Pakistan, riding on its symbiotic relationship with the US, had once yielded in the heyday of the Cold War, has eroded as the country's true calling has become increasingly apparent, and its relationship with the US has withered away to one of mutual suspicion. Pakistan was powerful enough in 1975 to defeat a much larger India to secure a non-permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council. The country standing thereafter went so far downhill that it barely managed to scrape through in 2011 when it contested against a much weaker Kyrgyzstan. Pakistan's sponsorship of and support to terrorists of myriad hues has been a major factor that has contributed to the country's plight. It was no surprise, therefore, that countries such as the US, the United Kingdom, France, Australia, and Japan, amongst others, called for Pakistan to act against the terrorist groups it has been harboring. The US, the UK, and France once again asked the UN Security Council Sanctions Committee to subject Jaish-e-Mohammed leader Masood Azhar to an arms embargo, global travel ban, and asset freeze. Such urgent callings not only placed Pakistan in an unenviable position, but also exposed the mischief behind the repeated Chinese blocking over the last 10 years of the listing of Masood Azhar as a global terrorist at the UN Security Council Resolution 1267 Sanctions Committee. Even after the Pulwama attack, China consciously chose not to mention the Jaish-e-Mohammed in its reaction, despite the outfit having unambiguously claimed responsibility for the attack. Opinion among experts on the direction the tensions between India and Pakistan will now take is divided. India has described Pakistan's foiled 20th of 7 February air attack as an act of aggression. It has also made it clear that only immediate and verifiable action by Pakistan against terrorists and terror groups operating from territories under its control was acceptable to it, not talks on terror, as Imran Khan has suggested, as a ruse to secure de-escalation without any significant concession. Whichever turn the current situation takes, one fact on which there is little ambiguity is that India has definitely changed the rules of the game as far as its response to Pakistan-backed terrorism is concerned. Pakistan's calculation that a low-cost asymmetrical war fought by terrorist proxies would keep India tied down, and its assumption that the threat of nuclear war will inhibit India from retaliating in a conventional manner can now be consigned to history. India has discarded its policy of strategic restraint and unveiled a new security doctrine in which Pakistan can no longer export terror to India without paying a heavy price for it. It is Pakistan which will now have to decide whether it has the appetite or resources to stand up to the escalation that future terrorist attacks on India will invariably invite. Pakistan has fairly and squarely brought upon itself the predicament that it finds itself in. Sponsorship of terrorist groups in pursuit of dubious political goals is condemned by the vast majority of the international community. Pakistan failed to foresee the impunity it had begun to consider the norm and take for granted would eventually come to a dwindling halt, and the retribution that would follow would be potent and severely damaging. All is still not lost for Pakistan, though. The question really is whether it is honestly willing to take firm, decisive, and demonstrable action against the terrorist empire it has created and nurtured over decades.
Thank you very much, Sister.